Here we are, another episode of Talking Sense. This season is all about sales, and I wanted to make sure that I could get the best of the best CROs onto the show. And so, who would be more relevant than Tim O'Neill, currently the CRO of Alation, which was just awarded the, Centaur Award for crossing 100 million in revenue. Pretty big milestone. Tim is also the dean of the CRO school at Pavilion, so he knows a few things about CROing. And we're going to dig into his approach for scaling a sales team, sales enablement, and last but not least, the difference between 0 to 100 and 100 to 300. So let's get into it. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about the conversation today. So looking forward to it, and let's see where it goes.
Let's see where it goes. So I saw you on a panel. So I have, obviously in my job, attend a lot of sales and marketing events, see a lot of panels, a lot of presentations. And every now and then someone just blows my mind and is just dropping gold nuggets left and right. And that was you on the CRO event for Pavilion. Everything you were talking about was amazing. And what I loved was the amount of rigor and process that you put around the team. And you had some very specific things that I thought were interesting. First of all, like how you run your forecast call. And that it's not just let's get on, what's your forecast? And then the next week, let's get on, what's your forecast? Depending on where you are in the quarter, it's a very specific rhythm and call. So maybe walk people through that. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's actually, I've learned a decent amount of my cadences, processes, or whatever through, you kind of pick and, pull from a lot of different experiences you have in life, and I think what I've found most, whether it be forecast or really anything, is people like predictability and they like data driven and they like to always know what to expect. And so what I learned is that having a 13-week predictable quarter is critical for my sales reps, my sales leaders, whatever it may be. And there's a difference between what's expected of my managers in that process, what's expected of my reps in that process, but it doesn't change willy-nilly throughout the quarter. Hey, we need to do this. We need to do this. It's the same 13 weeks, quarter after quarter after quarter. And what that looks like is, we quickly found in enterprise sales, and for perspective, Alation is in the enterprise data space, and we do enterprise sales. So my reps have roughly 5-month-long sales cycles. Our average deal size is, in the 6 figures, right? And so you have a lot of people involved in your deals, right? So your week to week change of a deal is not super dramatic. And for the most part, if there is a big, change that wasn't expected, the reps calling their manager anyways and telling them about it. They're not waiting for a forecast.
Yeah. This deal went totally sideways and I waited a week to call you. What?
Exactly.
No.
Hey, I just moved it out of the pipeline. Didn't want to tell you what went on until this week, So we found that getting on forecast calls was, for the most part, once you get to hey, what's the update? What's the update? People tune out, and you have to make sure you're delivering value. And I think where a lot of, in essence, CROs kind of mess up a little bit is whether it be not operating enough and just focusing on sales, or not being data-driven enough and partnering with marketing on what's needed from a data-driven perspective in order to be successful. So we actually pivoted and said 1 week would be a forecast call and all we would do is talk deals. The next week would be a pipeline call and all we talk is pipe. And so on that call, marketing is on that call. There are agreed upon metrics. And if someone, raises their hand and says, hey, I want to talk about my deal, they're not allowed to talk about it. It is purely a pipeline call. And you're talking about, hey, how does, how many leads does this rep have? How many, reps are we hiring next quarter that we need to get pipeline for? What are our conversion rates on expansion? What are our conversion rates on new logos? What are our conversion rates per region? Where are we underserved? Where are we overserved? And it is a pipeline call looking at not only this quarter, but because it's a 5-month long sales cycle, we're looking next quarter out in particular because that can be impacted, and current quarter pipe. And so it creates alignment, and it also reminds people that it's not just about in-quarter deals, it's about the future pipe. And so when you do that, it usually, it just creates a structure for everyone, and it shows them how important pipe really is.
And so, but there were some other ones. Some are deals. Some are, there was one meeting that was pipeline, which I love. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. So our entire
and I think 13 there was one about slipped deal. Didn't you do one that was like, you know what? If a deal's the handful of slip deals, let's talk about why.
No, what our 13-week cadence is: week 1 is pipe, week 2 forecast, week 3 pipe, week 4, But by the second week of every quarter, you have to get your QBRs done. By the 5th week of every quarter, you have to identify your top deals, right? And you do big deal reviews on every top deal for the quarter, okay? And then by the 9th week in the quarter, you have to have your committed deals that you're committing for the quarter, and then also know your next quarter forecast, right? And then when you leave that quarter, then you're reviewing all of your slip deals. Now, there's a process to every deal. Deals can't hit forecast unless it has a mutual action plan. We do certain things on how we stack rank reps too, on how we rank them on skill sets and what we do on our one-on-ones. But from an operating standpoint, it is 13 weeks. Week 5 is big deal review. Week 9 is commit with next quarter forecast. And then every other week alternates forecast and pipeline from a process perspective. And then by the beginning of week 2, you have to get your QBRs on.
So 2 things I like about this. First of all, as an over-preparer, I love it because it actually allows people to shine and be prepared. Mm-hmm. The worst is when you come to a meeting and it starts going and you're like, right? And then it's a crappy meeting right? So I love that I think you're clearly laying the expectations, and that allows your team to meet those expectations for the call. Second, I now don't show up to meetings that if I show up to a meeting twice and it's just not a good use of my time, I stop showing up to the meeting. Yep. And people now know this. And they're like, why are you not coming to this steering committee anymore? And I'm like, because all you talked about was cross-sell the whole time. And what the rule ROE for cross-sell was. Like, that has nothing to do with me. It's fine for me to listen in a couple times, but let me know when the meeting about my stuff is. and I think that, now you're going to get the right people to actually show up because it's about their stuff.
And you can be efficient with that. You'll find that actually what ends up happening too is beginning of a quarter meeting goes an hour. And once you get through that week 5, you usually find that the meeting ends up going 15, 20 minutes, right? Because people are prepared. And my team is definitely trained on, is this a wasteful meeting? Are there too many people? How much money does everyone make? Are we getting the value out of this meeting we're supposed to? And then second, if it's an hour-long meeting and we accomplish what we can in 20 minutes, it's okay to give people time back. That's a good thing to be efficient with people's time,
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about protecting the team's time. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because today there's a lot of technology, which is great. There's a lot of enablement. There's a lot of courses. And then there's a lot of distractions too. And then there's a lot of meetings, and there's internal stakeholders that want to get on your sales call. How do you protect your team's time?
So I always look at it from a process standpoint. I've told my sales leaders that when we put together the AE cadence, so what I kind of spoke to is my manager cadence. My AE cadence is a little different. My AEs have a different playbook and different expectations than some of my managers do. But my AE cadence is, in essence, you have a team call on Mondays, and that team call will be pipe or forecast, just the way I alternate, right? Then you're in the field Tuesday through Thursday, and on Friday it's one-on-one. And on one-on-one, you don't talk deals. You only talk about skill development review for yourself. You should not be talking deals in a one-on-one. You should be talking about how people develop. And we put that together, one, so the managers has the guidance, but then two, with the mindset of an hour and a half a week needs to be dedicated to process, and 38 and a half hours a week needs to be dedicated to selling. And so when we go and measure our stuff, our reps are allowed to, in essence, say, I'm spending too much time on process. I'm only supposed to do an hour and a half of process. I'm supposed to be selling more, and have that discussion with their leadership saying there's too much process in place. And so I always believe, like, in everything we do, like I always tell my reps, what the productivity model is, what productivity models mean, what means to managers, what they need to do to help affect the productivity model. And when you're data driven and you educate, most people really appreciate that. So when you tell reps, hey, you're only supposed to spend an hour and a half a week on process, it's really good benchmark, as opposed to just making up new process every quarter. You get to come back and go, hey, I need to do this new from a process standpoint. What can I take out? Because it needs to fit in that hour and a half a week of process.
Mm-hmm. I also love that it gives the AEs the opportunity to give the feedback, because,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, this could be maybe their second or third job. They might not feel emboldened to say this training is a waste of my time, right? They were told to do it and they're going to do it, right? Some will. There's always those. We always have the emboldened ones.
Yep.
But not everyone will, and you need that feedback loop. And so giving them the permission, hey, tell us if it's over and out. We need that balance.
Yeah, we actually, in our boot camp, when we start reps, we actually, I talk to every person that starts and go to market in our boot camp, whether it be face to face at the boot camp or virtually if I'm not able to make it to headquarters. And we actually go through what we expect of them, what a successful rep looks like at Alation, and then more than anything, what they can expect of their leadership in order to be successful. I think a lot of people only put the view of what you can do for me, but we always tell them what they can expect from their managers, not only in their cadence, but what skills and traits their managers are supposed to be giving them in their
Yeah.
day-to-day to make sure it's adding value to
Yeah. And that's critical for them to want to stay.
them. Mm-hmm.
They want to feel like they're progressing their career, and everyone wants to be learning all the time. The great people want to be learning at every stop in their journey.
Yeah, and the thing that we also do, and sorry to be a little bit of a ping pong, but we also tell them what it takes to get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, perfect example, we just had a leadership training, a week and a half ago now, and I flew everyone to Salt Lake City. We did a training with a consultant, an external consultant, on how to get better at process and how to do this for scale as we kind of go from the 100 to 300 million discussion. And I flew in 4 or 5 individual contributors that weren't in leadership yet, just to get the view of what leadership looks like, to make sure that they still wanted to opt into that discussion down the road, and if it was something they wanted to do and they were ready for it. So when it was time to do it, they understood it a little bit more.
Yeah. And what a great opportunity for them too,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's how you keep them engaged and motivated to want to progress at your company. Another thing that you talked about, and I think that I stalked you down to talk about this, is just keeping enablement simple. And how do you, like, we're going to talk about scale later, but typically scale means a more robust product, different geos, maybe you vertical, maybe not. But how do you infuse simplicity in all of your enablement?
I think the key is alignment on TAM and ICP, and I think if you can agree as a company on what the TAM is, who your ideal customer profile is, and what the message is that goes to them, then you can really simplify things. I think where you struggle, and in particular, early stage companies struggle, hey, here's a new use case. Maybe there's some more money over here. Hey, maybe there's a new person to sell to over here. Hey, let me try this in there. And you
Yeah,
just
okay if
really
you're Series A trying to establish product market fit. Not
agree.
good once you have any type of scale.
Exactly right. And so once you kind of own that message and agree on the TAM and the ICP, it's so critical just not to differentiate from it, because the most important thing, if you have the TAM and the ICP correct, and the TAM is big enough and you know who to sell to, it's perfecting that simple message versus a really, really diverse message and dynamic message. And it's not that I'm not trying to be, dynamic or verbose or whatever it may be, but my hiring profile changes significantly if I can simplify that message. I always people talk about TAM for their company. I like to talk about TAM for my hiring candidates, right? If I need someone that knows data, can do a demo, can install the product, right? And then also go to the customer's house and cook them dinner. Like, I'm not going to have a lot of people coming in the door to want
I
to
call
work.
those purple squirrels.
Exactly.
Pretty hard to find them.
Exactly. So we got to have such a simple message that it
Yeah.
allows me to expand the TAM for my hiring profile.
Right. Especially if scale is all about quota coverage. It's all about hiring.
That's the model. Exactly. Yep.
So let's talk about that. Let's go there. You've been doing this a long time. So what's different 5 years ago, 10 years ago to today?
I think education is, I think if you look at the profile of our customers today, and in particular in the last 3 years, especially as COVID hit and whatnot, um, people come to calls way more educated. And they actually almost probably already have an opinion on the solution in the market before they even talk to you. And so I think that, the simplification of that message is important, but also the profile of a rep needs to be one in which they in essence can own a message a little bit more. I kind of joke with my leadership that I don't want the rep that reads the news, right? I want the rep that tells a story, you know, the one that calls me up and says, hey, this is what happened in the meeting, and this is their decision criteria, and this is their decision process. And, I'll just write it all up and put it in Salesforce and hope that the deal closes, isn't influencing it enough. And the one that tells a story and is believable because they know the market and they believe in the market is the one that people buy from nowadays. And it's critical because they're so educated on the market already. If you show up not being educated on your competition or on the market, you lose credibility right out of the chute, and people don't want to buy from that person.
Yeah, there's the challenger buyer customer. I always get it wrong, but I'm sure you know the book. But it talks about deconflicting information. Like you almost have to be a coach and be like, okay, look, this is what you're going to hear from this. Here, you have to be able to really command and know your space. And then I think you're right. There needs to be a little bit of an evangelism for your product line that inspires people to want to choose it.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's important about that is the earlier you take that stance in the discussion and in the process, the more people appreciate it. If you call me up and you're like, hey, what's Alation's view on, ABC, and I take a stance, and then 3 meetings later, you tell me that a competitor believes X, and I change my stance now because of your research with another competitor, my credibility has started to wane, right? But if I,
Right.
in essence, say, hey, this is my stance, and this is what you're going to hear from everybody else,
Yeah.
and this is where we do really well, and if this
Yeah.
is your problem, we'll help you solve it. The best ones actually go down the path and go, this may not be your problem now, but it will be at some point. Call me when you're ready.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes really well.
It's that but that again, that takes a lot of knowledge about the competitive set, which is changing all of the time. So there's an intense curiosity, I think, and self-motivation that AEs need to have to be able to like digest, process, and like stay up to date with all the movement that's happening in an industry. So let's talk about scaling a company.
Mm-hmm.
And what changes? You guys, you hit 50, you hit 150. Now you're looking to go to 300. What's the difference between in 150 to 300 versus 0 to 150?
So I've been fortunate that I've actually seen zero before. I don't know if I say fortunate, but at the time I thought it was fortunate. And I would, it's interesting. I think that all companies go through 3 phases when you start up, right? And I always say phase 1 is product market fit, you know? Phase 2 is kind of scale, and phase 3 is cost of acquisition, you know? And if you think about phase 1, I feel like that's, dependent upon your market and your TAM, it's probably roughly in the 0 to 50 million range. And the profile that you're looking for from a resource, or the people that are on board, are really good at figuring out that ideal customer profile and TAM that we spoke about earlier in the discussion, right? They know the market, they understand the space, they're helping you with messaging, right? And they're helping you figure out TAM, and whatnot, and the way to message against your competition that will resonate with your prospect. Once you've owned that, you have to get to this scale phase of enabling that new hiring profile for your reps that can simplify that message and get people in the door that can sell, that didn't come from the space. And I think once you start to get to the back end of that scale, that's kind of the scale phase in my eyes, you then have to get really, really, really good at process. And the funny thing about that discussion is, the people that are really good at a space and good at like figuring out a way to sell a deal and good at messaging, a lot of times they're not really good at process.
Or they don't like
They don't want to do it.
it.
And the hard part is
rage against the machine. That's why they were
exactly.
going early stage.
And it's, I always make the joke of the sales. There's the sales rep that says, "Hey, listen, I want to be in leadership. I really want to get promoted, but please do me a favor. Don't hire any more reps inside my territory, because I want to make sure I can make as much money as possible before I get promoted." Right? Whereas the ones that want to get promoted, in essence, say, "Hey, listen, I want you to bring as many reps on board that I can sell with, so that when I do get promoted, I can help them." And it's that non-growth mindset or scale or process mindset that get in the way of kind of getting to that next phase. Sometimes they just want to be selling widgets and making up pricing, not have a pricing model, just kind of, hey, this looks like a 500K deal. Let's just throw 500K at them and see what happens.
Yeah, totally. Now one of the things that you showed me was, which I thought was brilliant, because again, small scale, less AEs, way easier to observe and understand what's going on, right?
Yep.
More people, remote, more
Yep.
managers. Like, how do you even know if people are working? We hear nightmare stories about people having 2 jobs and I don't think that's happening here, but there's that end of the spectrum. And then there's yes, they're working very hard, but they're just not effective. And, how do you flag? It's like, you got to look for exceptions.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. We've been fortunate that we haven't had a lot of resignations at Alation. I'm sure I'm going to jinx it right now, but
yeah, knock on wood.
Exactly. I do believe quiet quitting is a thing. I think that people look at it and say, why am I doing this job? And I'm going to work 9 to 3 versus 7 to 6 sort of thing. And there's probably a lot to unpack there as to why. But we wanted to figure out warning signs in that scenario, right? Because there's always a skill and will discussion, right? And hopefully you can interview for both of those things, but the will becomes really apparent, as they start working for you, So we actually have a dashboard. Get me in trouble. I'm sure my reps will listen to this and they'll call me up and be like, "What are you talking about?" But,
we didn't know that. Whoa. All of a sudden you'll see all the logins increase.
I used to work at a company called Cognos, and back in the day when we were in QBRs, you'd come in and one of the VPs of sales would bring up the dashboard of who logged into Salesforce the most that quarter. And you were like heading into the QBR like the 3 weeks before. You're like, I got to log in as many times as possible.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some bot somewhere who does that.
Exactly.
It's an app on the App Exchange.
So we actually have a dashboard for our managers that can show them, and we track reps that have been with the company less than 90 days and more than 90 days, but it shows them activity in essence in our enablement tools, right? So we have HighSpot, we have Gong, we have Clary. And so we in essence track their activity there. And then we use some of the data that's provided to us from Gong, Clary, and whatnot. And we in essence get to, activity and then conversion rates based upon activity. And so we can pretty quickly find out who's the most active rep and who has the best conversion rates. And 9 times out of 10 activity, the most activity, the better the conversion rate. The irony of the situation is right around 6 months, when the activity goes down, the conversion rates go up. So once they're past 6 months, they've actually kind of conquered the skill, and they shouldn't be in the tools anymore. Like they should be in deals more. They should be in whatever more. So if they're spending too much time in the tools after 6 months, you're actually finding they're struggling and trying to learn messaging more than they are actually winning. So we track it pretty closely, and I'm sure some people probably think I'm crazy, but it's just another set of data that I have on what's going on in my field.
Well, yeah. And I think also, I'm also thinking like, I wonder if that is also some sort of feedback loop and how good your enablement is, right?
Yeah.
So if you've had multiple cohorts that have used it and it's done great, and then let's say you change the message,
yeah,
and no one's using it, then what happened there?
Or better yet, a certain cohort didn't use it in the first 90 days as much as another cohort. Was it something that we trained incorrectly? Was there an environmental thing that we had at during boot camp that messed things up? We actually haven't got to that level. It's a good point. But
well, now that you're doing it, you know how it is. Well, this is how I think data is. It's like a sweater, right? Like once you get one thing, then you're like, oh, now we can do this, and now we can do that, and like you can get pretty crazy pretty fast. But
I don't
love
have
just
the rule for myself that says I can only do an hour and a half of process a week. That doesn't apply to me. That's just my reps.
Yeah, that doesn't apply to you.
Exactly.
Love it. One of the things that you talked about in our prep was just the importance of like skip leveling and getting out and really getting to know your managers, and your reps. How do you think about that? How much time do you spend on that?
I do my best to, I think the hardest thing to do as you have success in your career is to find people that will tell you the truth. I think people, even myself as an example, I went from one company to another, and probably about 30, 40 people followed me from that last company to this company. And there's a part of you that's flattered. There's also a part of you that wants to hire people that because you're de-risking the hiring process. But at the same time too, as you go through that process, you also tend to surround yourself with a lot of people that may not tell you the truth that much.
Right.
So you hire some of your best friends, and they're like, "You're brilliant," and you're like, "I'm not. Please stop." And so I think the best thing you can do is not only skip level, but when you can skip level and find that person that doesn't just complain, right? You'll find people that love to just complain. We all know them. And you want to hear about something that's wrong, Tim? Let me tell you. And I'm like, okay, that's not really where I was going, right? But when you can find that person that will tell you not only the truth, but also give you some creative ideas on some solutions, it's like it's worth its weight in gold, because you can start to get a better view on things. Hey, how is this new manager doing? How is this new process that we're rolling out doing? You talk about new process you implement to your sales leaders. Like, that was great. You talk to the rep and they're like, that is killing my day. And
Yeah.
like you wouldn't get that feedback from a manager, so you have to skip level. So I try to do my best to build it into my calendar at least, every other week, just to spend 30 minutes with somebody that doesn't report to me to get a feel on what's going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, sometimes I think it has to be it has to be like, oh, I'm in New York office. Let's go out to dinner, and not do the clicky thing. Like sometimes it's easy, especially when you've been at a company a while. Like there are people I'm closer to here that I'd love to just go to dinner with them, every time I went to New York.
Completely.
But that's not going to get us anywhere as a company. You've got to be including other people and new people and so sometimes even getting out of an office environment, that's when you really, the canaries really sing.
I think the other thing too is like, the funny part is my managers now know I do it, so they're usually, when I talk to my managers, they'll be like, I don't even know why you're asking me about my forecast. You've already called 3 of my reps,
Yeah.
and the funny part is when you call a manager and ask them their forecast, right? Hey, what's your forecast look like? Manager's like, it's bleak. It is going to be a tough quarter. I'll tell you.
And then you're like, what about this deal?
The best thing is you call the rep. I always say the rep wants to make dad happy. The rep's like, let me tell you about all the deals I have going on, and it's going to be an awesome quarter. So you just get it buffered up the chain. So it's
right.
It's humorous.
Sometimes you got to get the unvarnished positivity, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about marketing a little bit. How do you align with your marketing counterparts?
So we have a weekly sheet. What I was kind of alluding to, that forecast pipeline discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing that marketing and sales do at Alation, because I don't want to say it's me and I'm my head of marketing. It's marketing and sales. Is we have metrics that we all agree on, right? So how many sales does a rep need? How many should come from the rep? How many should come from the channel? How many should come from marketing? And when you have that view, you very, very rarely get in the world of like, hey, my lead's bad and it's your fault and whatever, you know what I mean? Which I think you see a lot of organizations. And so if you can deduce to how many, leads are needed for a rep to be successful, right, you very quickly get to a good relationship with marketing, because they know I own this amount, rep owns this amount, partner owns this amount. And if the rep owns that, gets that many, they own the conversion rates and whatnot, and that's on the manager. And so where I've gotten to with marketing is just a very data-driven approach. Mm-hmm. And by taking that approach, we all have our own accountability numbers. And the crazy thing is literally in the 3 years I've been in the role, we haven't changed the numbers, right? We just changed the reps. Now, don't get me wrong. Partner needs to deliver more. The sales rep needs to deliver more. The marketing team needs to deliver more when you go from 20 reps to 100 reps. But the amount of leads per rep doesn't change. It's not like we woke up one morning and said, hey, this number was wrong because sales didn't hit their number. If sales didn't hit their number, we converted poorly, and that's our problem. Mm-hmm. We agreed on the numbers. We kept them constant. And by doing that, we don't create thrash for either of us. It just creates a kind of a Bible of where are our problems. And as you said in your presentation, we always look for the red.
Find the red.
Exactly. And like, it doesn't allow for me to tell you where the red is and marketing to tell you where they think the red is. It's a central agreement on where we know the red is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. We have something similar, although we do change assumptions on, like we watch every segment and do every quarter make assumptions on conversions and cycle times.
Okay. So, and do your conversions change consistently enough that you need to make those assumptions?
Depends on the segment.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are way bigger than us, obviously.
It depends on the segment, and like we created some new segments that operated really differently. And so we needed to like break it out in a more granularly.
Are you more transactional than we are? How long is your deals?
Well, we have a real potpourri. We have a velocity segment.
Okay.
And that was new a couple years ago. So, figuring that once we kind of figure it out, I would say it doesn't change as much,
Yeah.
but there is that period. We've always had enterprise. That's like our bread and butter. So that's like 60% of our business. And then we added a strategic segment last year,
Okay.
which had a lot of variability over the course of the year. But I think now we sort of understand the pattern better.
Yeah.
And so, that'll create less, but that's sort of how we look at it. And just to make sure we're inspecting all the conversions along the way. But yeah. All right. Well, 2 questions you can't get off the show without answering. So we have a big campaign going on right now, Tim, about confidence. And, our goal is to put our data and our insights behind every sales and marketing team to give them confidence.
Yeah.
And rather, doesn't matter the economic climate. We think if you have the best insights, you can be confident. So I've thought a lot about this word. And so I just want to know for you personally, like what gives you confidence to be able to do your job?
It's an interesting question. I would say that I think it's because of the foundation is built on metrics. I've I've put a lot of effort into making my team data driven and understanding our past and why we've gotten to where we are from a metric standpoint and what's changed and what are leading and lagging indicators of our business. And I think because we are so data driven, our foundation is really solid, and so what I mean by that is, just from a forecast standpoint, our forecast accuracy, even at the beginning of a quarter at a company level, is usually about within 5%, and that's, not typical, especially
No,
in
that's
this.
amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's just because we're data driven, we do our best to not have opinions be derived from non-data driven discussions. Everyone can have an opinion. Obviously, you need to have opinions, but you can't have an opinion or a state of mind that's based upon no data whatsoever, And I think because data is, quite frankly, we're a data company, so that's hopefully shouldn't be surprising.
You got to drink the champagne.
Yeah. So I think because of that, I'm confident in at least knowing that if we have a problem, we'll find it before the problem comes up.
I once told my team, no data, no decision.
Exactly.
They come to me like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Like, give me some context.
Exactly. Is this a beer discussion or are we actually working? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's happening? Yeah. So next question, final one.
Yep.
I think you learn more from your failures than your success. And so what's an example of just kind of an F up that taught you something that you can share with our listeners, and maybe they can avoid that mistake themselves in the future?
I think probably 2. One is definitely a current state situation, and the other is, just I think you learn through time. And if I think back to COVID, when COVID hit, and the panic that happened with COVID, and if we all remember, like, it probably was only like 3 or 4 months, right? But there was still like a March to June timeframe where everyone was like, do I have a job? Am I still working? Sort
Stop
of thing.
prospecting. It's rude. It's like, okay, we have a business to run.
Exactly. And there was just such an overreaction to the short game, and you're kind of seeing it a little bit right now with the macroeconomic climate right now, just this overreaction to the short game, which is fine. Like, I get it. But I think that, history will tell you that, recessions happen. There's a dip every 10 years. And thinking for the long game, whether it be personally or professionally in your career, is, although really challenging, is always the way to go. Right. And it's such, and the best example that I can give is just even I think back at COVID, like we stopped hiring for like 6 months. And that, I mean, it's fine. Like I think everybody did. They're all like, like, should we be hiring? Should we not be? But if you had like taken advantage of talent out there in the market and hired through the problem, you would have woke up on the other side of it, with this talent in your organization that would have been second to none, And I just think that there's always thinking about the long game in 3 or 4 years from now versus 6 months from now. That is really challenging to do. But you have to like really make yourself do it if you're going to be a successful executive or successful in life, just think about the stock market. How many people do you know that say, hey, listen, you're supposed to buy low and sell high, but then as soon as the market goes down, they sell. They don't have a cash reserve over in the corner waiting for the market to go down. They watch their stocks go down and then sell. Yeah.
Right. Or this stock is on a tear. Oh, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Not even sell it. Not I own it, I'm going to sell it. It's like, why don't I buy this when it's high? This looks great.
Yeah. Yeah. We all just are lemmies. We all just follow each other around. And I think the investors are very similar. Like they kind of have their own echo chamber.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
Which rains down on us, of course, as operators.
And the second thing I was going to say was, I think you have to sometimes challenge yourself to surround yourself. I've hired a lot of friends in my career, and it's really paid dividends because, good work ethic, what's with them. But I think sometimes you have to challenge yourself to hire someone different, that's just not your typical hire, and maybe it fails, but at the same time too, maybe it makes you so much better because they've thought of things differently or they're challenging you in different ways. And so I think that if I had to do it over again, I would challenge myself with hiring some people that would completely like not fit in my standard hiring profile, just to see if there's someone that could have me expand my hiring profile to try something different.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe bring an X factor that wasn't there.
Yep.
I always think some of my best have been, which is hard to do when you've got, a tight budget and this and that, but sometimes you got to create a role for somebody. You're like, yep. I think you're awesome and you need to be here. And so we are going to create a role.
And I'm going to bet on you. Here. Exactly. And I just wish I did that a little bit more,
Yeah. It's hard to justify, but every single time I've done that, it's paid off. Like they've just had this multiplicative impact and gone and done, things that no one could have, we didn't know we needed,
Yeah.
So, well, Tim, you're a very busy man and I appreciate you coming on and sharing. We talked about so much. I love the long game mentality. That was a great way to wrap up. I love your passion for data and a data-driven process. You are like speaking my language. It's so great. And I love how you've transitioned that into really scaling an amazing team. It seems like you guys are on a real tear, leader in the Magic Quadrant, doing great things. I'm sure we're going to see you get to that 300 and beyond. There's no doubt. I would invest if I could. And, just appreciate all the things that you shared with our audience. It was a great episode. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to see the output of it. And I will say, for whatever it's worth, when we were at the event in New York City, I was equally impressed with your presentation. So I look forward to seeing the output here, and if it makes sense, coming back on again sometime.
Yeah, we'll keep learning together.
It'd be great.